Well, good evening. And my name is Honorary Past Imperial Potentate Dr. Lawrence Henry. And I am from the desert of Texas, the oasis of Dallas, Zakat Temple number 164. And I am the director of the strategic planning and development for the ancient Egyptian Arabic order, Nobles of the Mystic Shrine. On behalf of the 47th Imperial Potentate, Thomas R. Hughes, and the 50th Imperial Commanders, Dr. Karen Wright Chisholm, I'd like to welcome you to this very important Rally the Vote Town Hall webinar, where the purpose of this event is to increase voter education and enable voter mobilization. Tonight, we have a highly diverse group of panelists that will help us drive tonight's program. And with that, our first panelist is Mr. Joe W. Lewis. Mr. Lewis is the Deputy Executive Director of the Board of Election Commissions of East St. Louis, Illinois, which is second oldest in Illinois. He is successfully administering in the office of board as stipulated by the Illinois statute. Joe W. Lewis Jr. has over 25 years of corporate, state, regional, local, and professional consulting experience. Most recently, his efforts have been combined with youth and community building. An academic with a strategic and marketing mindset. He's a prolific writer and motivational speaker. In 1984, he received his bachelor's in general science and general studies with an emphasis on business and English from the University of Kansas. In 1990, he received a certificate in the Minority Business Enterprise Programming from the Tuck School of Business from Dartmouth College. He also has an honorary doctorate degree, which he received in 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Joe W. Lewis Jr.
Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here.
Our second panelist, Mr. Daniel L. D.T. Thompson. Mr. Thompson is the 24th most worshipful Grand Master of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of the Free and Accepted Masons of the North Carolina and Jurisdiction Incorporated. He was elected to the position on 28th of September in 2018, and on the 28th of September of 2018, he became that Grand Master. In 1990, he became a distinguished military graduate from South Carolina State College, which is now university. Mr. Thompson was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army in the Military Intelligence Corps. Mr. Thompson has retired on the 31st day of December 2013. Mr. Thompson has a Bachelor in Science, Bachelor of Criminal Justice, and a Master's in Homeland Security. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Daniel L. D.T. Thompson.
Good evening, sir. It's an honor to be here.
Our third panelist is Judge Edwin A. Lombard. He was one of the first African Americans admitted to Tulane in New Orleans, Louisiana, where he was a Rockefeller Scholar, and he earned his BA degree in 1967. Mr. Lombard attended Southern University Law School in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and received his JD from Loyola University, New Orleans College of Law, where he was a Roosevelt Fellow in 1970. He also attended New York University School of Law Institute for Appellate Judges. After receiving his BA, Lombard worked for the Voter Education Project as part of the voter registration drive following his administration to the Louisiana State Bar in 1973. Lombard was elected to the position of clerk of the Orleans Parish Criminal Justice Court. He has served as the president of the Bar Association in Louisiana's Judicial Council, was a member of the New Orleans Legal Assistance Corporation and Total Community Action, Inc. In 2012, Lombard was awarded the George W. Crockett Jr. Lifetime Achievement Award by the National Bar Association. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Judge Edward A. Lombard.
Thank you very much for having me here, and it's just an honor to be in this group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Also, we have Maurice G. Smith. A native of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and a graduate of Westchester University with a Bachelor of Arts in Arts, Theater of Arts. He is also a Master's of Fine Arts from Mountain Theatre Conservatory in London, England. Maurice started in stage productions such as Cooley High, the musical under the direction Freedom Theater, Walter Dallas, and The Piano Lesson, which was nominated Best Actor in the Wilmington, Delaware Drama League 1997-1998. He's also seen in Adam Shatler's Mr. Deeds and Drew Carey's Bruce Almighty. The Browns and Washington's on the BET Kingdom's Business. He's a regular on Young Dylon, which is a highlight of a few of his 50-plus TV and film credits. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Maurice G. Smith. Lastly, but certainly not least, we have Miss Antoinette Barksdale. She's the General Counsel to the United States Department of Justice, Community Relations Service. Antoinette is responsible for all aspects of legal matters and high programmatic matters at CRS. She also handled complex civil rights cases for the DOJ for over 20 years and 30 years for the federal government. Prior to becoming general counsel at CRS, she was a senior trial attorney at DOJ in the Civil Rights Division, Employment Litigation Section. As a senior litigating attorney, she has extensive experience on national level federal civil law cases, including Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1962, Title VIII of the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968, and the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the Age Discrimination Employment Act, and the Equal Pay Act. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my distinct pleasure to welcome Ms. Antoinette Barksdale. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be joining you tonight for this very important topic.
Thank you so very, very much to our panelists for giving us the time tonight to spend on this very important topic. At this time, we'll go over the ground rules. The purpose of this forum is to educate on specific aspects during this voting season and further to facilitate mobilization. I will guide the discussion in a very unbiased manner. No one will endorse or discredit any party or candidate. No one will make mention to a political party or candidate during this forum. Responses to questions will be no longer than 3 minutes. The duration for this actual forum will be approximately 40 minutes for the panel discussion, with 10 minutes allotted for you, the audience, to ask our panelists questions, and then we will close with closing comments. Lastly, the opinions on this broadcast does not necessarily reflect the opinions, views, and policies of the ancient Egyptian Arabic orders, nobles of Mystic Shrine, or speaking on behalf of any person in their professional capacity. I say again that it does not reflect the opinions, views, and policies of the ancient Egyptian Arab orders of Mystic Shrine, or speaking on behalf of their personal capacity, not their personal capacity, their professional capacity. With that, let's proceed to the panel discussion with Ms. Barksdale, speaking in her personal capacity, not the Department of Justice. With that, our first question, Ms. Barksdale, what is the difference between voter education, voter registration, and voter mobilization? What phase are we in, and how can we maximize this phase?
Thank you for that question, Dr. Lawrence. So first and foremost, those three things represent different times. First, voter education is teaching people what I would say is basic civics 101 and what your rights are. What are the rights in federal government, state and local government voting, and it typically addressed voters' preparedness, ready to fully participate in the voting process. It pertains to relatively more complex types of information about voting. And it's just basically it's educating people as to what are their rights and what are the issues that are going to be on the ballot. And those who are eligible to move from being educated about voting, you go to voter registration. So, what is voter registration? And it is the process that allows citizens to register with election officials to become eligible to vote. And in 49 states, voters are required to register to vote. North Dakota is the only state that does not require this. So you must be registered to vote. An individual must be 18 years of age, United States citizen, a resident of the jurisdiction which he or she is registering in order to be eligible for that election. And under federal law, every state must allow residents to register to vote for federal elections. And so this is what registration is. It is the process. What do you need to do to be ready to vote? And mobilization, just put it simply, mobilization is the process of getting citizens out to vote. What can you do? Knock on doors, canvass, phone bank, all of those kinds of things. There's so many organizations that are mobilizing as we sit here and discuss with you right now, encouraging people. And you usually start mobilization about 3 to 4 weeks right outside of an election. So right now we're in the phase of mobilizing. Most places you are already registered to vote. Registration has closed. There are a few places where registration is still open, but in most places right now, registration is closed. Most people are mobilizing. They're phone banking, door knocking, just trying to get folks out to vote, to make sure there's a plan to get you to the poll. You must work with your local established organizations to mobilize. Use bank mobilizations, personal interactions. All of those are ways how you can mobilize. And here's a resource for you. 1-866-OUR-VOTE. If you have any questions about what's the process, where are you, you can reach out to 1-866-OUR-VOTE. These are nonpartisan organizations to help you prepare yourself and get ready to vote. Thank you, Dr. Lawrence.
Thank you so very much for that very thoughtful response and thorough response. And I tell you, tonight we were here to educate, to facilitate the mobilization. And I would say to our viewing audience, ask, engage us, ask questions, and comment on things that you have questions about. And I want to remind our panelists that let's take about 3 minutes to answer the questions, because we have a lot of questions to go through this evening, and I know we want to get on with the entire program. So with that, thank you so very much. Mr. Lewis.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Lewis, when is it too late to register? And what are the ways to register?
Well, as of August 2024, 47 states, the District of Columbia, Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands all have early registration and early voting in person. It varies from state to state. We would suggest throughout the entire country to vote and early as possible. In the state of Illinois, we allow you to register and vote on actually election day for those that have missed the window. In other states, you don't have that option. So what we are suggesting is to early vote. And the reason we want you to early vote is because in some districts, in some states, you have entities that have been purged out of voting for whatever reason, or have been restricted and redistricted out. And if you wait until election day and you go to the polls and find out that you cannot vote for whatever reason, then you may miss the entire process of voting this year. So we suggest you vote and go in early to do that. And if for some reason you have found out that you have been redistricted out or purged out, you then possibly can register, depending on what state you're in, and still vote if you do it early.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so very much for that
Yes,
very
sir.
thoughtful question. A very thoughtful question. You have to stay on, I guess you're saying you have to stay on top of it. It's a personal responsibility
You have
because
to.
you could be purged out. So that's something that's resonated with me. Thank you so very much for that very thoughtful response. Mr. Smith, many say my vote doesn't count. Why should I vote? Please provide reasons why voting is important.
Well, I mean, for me, this is like you could go toss up and throw up anything. You could just go from common sense. Anytime people have died for your right to do something, you have to take advantage of it. Anytime you have people that are doing so much to try to stop any race, culture, creed, whatever from doing something, it's important. The question is understood, right? We understand why there's that question, because most people feel like, oh, I go out there and vote and I do these things and I go out and nothing changes. We look for, we hear all the people running for stuff, do all these promises, and this is in every level of voting and anywhere we go. And next thing you know, nothing really changes. You don't feel the change when you're disenfranchised, or when you're struggling, or when you're going through stuff. So then you just say, hang it, I don't need to vote. But what we don't realize is that you have something like a Bloody Sunday, right? You have other acts of sheer violence to keep African Americans and others from voting. You have where the goal line, as they say in sports, has been moved so a certain people or a certain can't vote. When we go to, I was reading something over on the Black Caucus, and it talked about it. And just to give you a little insert from there, it was not until the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that most of the discriminatory laws and practices put in place to limit Black civic engagement were outlawed. However, we know that Black Americans continue to feel the effect and disenfranchisement to this day. Only a decade ago, in 2013, a case in Shelby County versus Holder, the Supreme Court reversed part of the Voting Rights Act, effectively removing federal oversight of state and local voting laws. Since then, several states enacted more restrictive and discriminatory voter laws, which included practices like strict photo ID requirements, reduced early voting, the elimination of same-day registration, annual voter registration drives, and more, while several groups successfully sued. So me talking about this, I'm saying that if you're going through this length to stop a person from being able to vote for any reason, you have to see how important it is for you to vote. And now we can vote early. We saw what happened in the earlier elections in Georgia, where there's always these ideals. So voting is important. It's our right as citizens of this United States of America. We need to keep it, and we need to exercise it, because you never know when your one vote, your one click takes something over and it makes something go into legislation. That one vote. And then it gives you good conscience to be able to talk about it, to be able to have an opinion, to be able to go to your state representative, to be able to go to your local representative, to be able to say it. You can in good conscience say, hey, when I had my time to exercise and say what I want to happen in this state, in this country, I took advantage of it, because that's what I had to do, because I am not said politician. But then I can hold that politician in good conscience to his standards because I voted, because I exercised my right. You wouldn't have an Elon Musk or people like that, or you wouldn't have people who are in certain positions doing things to sway a vote, or however we want to put it, eloquently put it, put money behind it if it wasn't important. So I look to, and it's I can say that, and I was not to give my age, but around 1988, I was 18, you know, and that was Jesse time and all that stuff. Run, Jesse, run. And we was excited. Come on, baby.
If you can, brother, 3 minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hey, listen.
I'm sorry. I get excited about you got to vote. You just have to vote. That's all I'm saying. It's all right. People have died for it, and you could go anywhere. That question right there can go in so many different directions. And thank you for letting me share. But we must exercise our right as citizens, no matter what, to vote. So you can, in a good conscience, live in this America and make some change.
Well, thank you so very much for that thoughtful response. Thank you for citing the Voting Act of 1964 and also alluding to voters, some sorts of voter suppression, we'll later get to later on in this panel discussion. But I want to remind our viewers that the purpose of this forum is to enable voter education, to facilitate, to drive voter mobilization. And the opinion stated on this broadcast does not necessarily reflect the opinions, views, policies of the ancient Egyptian Arabic order nobles of the Masonic Shrine or our panelists. They're speaking on their personal capacity, not their professional capacity. And also, we have to keep our questions, our responses to 3 minutes. And also, I strongly encourage our viewers to comment and ask questions, because soon the floor is going to be open and we're going to allow questions from the floor to be answered by our panelists. And with that, we're going to move to Judge Lombard. Judge Lombard with question number 4. How can we hold elected officials accountable to the communities that put them in place?
Well, before we get to that, let's talk about vote counting. I've been in elective office for 49 years. I was elected in 1974 as clerk of criminal district court in New Orleans. That may not sound significant, but we run the elections. I was one of the first African-American election officials in the country. And votes do count. 29 years later, I ran for the Court of Appeal in New Orleans. And out of about 250,000 votes, I won by 29 votes. So votes do count. And there's also Adolf Hitler won his party nomination by 1 vote. And you see how that affected the world. So 1 vote can affect the whole world. My question was to, 1 minute. Oh, how can we hold elected officials accountable? I think we hold elected officials accountable by voting, by attending meetings, by organizing in our neighborhoods. And I want you to understand that sometimes we give our own elected officials that are our color free passes. We give them passes that we didn't give the other people who used to be elected. I think it's time now that all elected officials, whatever they color, become accountable to the people who put them in office. I think that we've witnessed over the years, or I've witnessed over the years, a change from third person plural politics. When we used to run, we say what's what we can do for our community. The first person singular politics is what am I going to do for myself or my friends? And I think that has been detrimental to our communities. When you sit around and look and see that now you can't go to a school in your neighborhood, you wonder why. The neighborhood health clinics are closed, you wonder why. It's because somebody's making that decision. And the person that's making that decision is holding that office because I didn't go out and vote. In Louisiana, we had a governor elected with 30-something% of the total vote. Now, that's going to be very dreadful for the people who have to live under that regime for the next 4 years. When you look at goods and services in your neighborhood, you've just got to say to yourself, am I going to do anything about it, or am I going to continue living under this regime? And the only way to change that in a democracy is through voting and through holding those people accountable. I used to have a saying that it wouldn't matter the color of the hand on the trigger if it kills you, whether it's a black hand, a white hand, a green hand, or whatever hand. And so if somebody's supposed to do their job, we should expect them to do their job and understand that people died and people sacrificed a lot to get where we are today. And it's no excuse. We give them too many passes and we say it's okay because the white man did it or the other man did it. It's time for us to stop that and hold our elected officials accountable for what we elected them for.
Excellent, sir. Thank you for that thoughtful response. And a few things that I pulled out of that is accountability, vote counting. I mean, you won a seat double digits. Adolf Hitler won it by a single digit. So going back to Mr. Smith's, does my vote count? Absolutely. And
well, in addition to that, how many people are influenced? In 49 years of office, I must have hired at least 1,000 people. In 20 years on the bench, I must have written at least 250 opinions. So that's influencing a lot of lives and people. And so when we look at elected officials, we only look at it for the moment, but can you imagine the opinions, how many lives that touched and how many, so we got to look at the bigger picture. It's just not whether or not the gas station is open and the price of gas went up. It's the entire picture because we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about housing, we're talking about employment, and we have to touch all those kinds of things if we want to make this community vibrant and whole again.
Yes, sir. So with that, we're going to turn our sights to another question, Judge Lombard, because you have extensive experience in this field. So we're going to ask you a few questions, sir. So how can we define what direct and indirect voter suppression is? And can you provide some examples?
Well, there's plenty of examples. Georgia leads the parade. Some direct example is cutting the number of polling sites and making them further and further away to get there. It is prohibiting people from giving water to somebody in line. It is stopping people from getting rides to the poll. It is in Louisiana, you have to get a petition to do a permit to do a voter registration drive. You have to get okay to do a voter registration drive. This is all deliberate. You're having to go miles to a polling place. One of the things that I did 49 years ago when I took office is to ensure that the polling sites were fair and it was equally distributed so people wouldn't have to go way out of their way. But somehow some of us have lost our way and allowed election officials to do those things, and sometimes it'd be beyond our control and we have to do it. But there have been no shame to the game, and it is very obvious what some of the legislatures are doing around the country. They're making it more and more difficult. No rides, no help at the polls, and making it more difficult to get to the polls by moving them away from the populations. Most of the stuff these days, the fight we have, what's different from today and 50 years ago is that it was overt. We could see the robes that the Klan had on. Now it's covert, and the covert attack has put us to sleep a little bit. What Black community needs is a Paul Revere. We need somebody to go around and say the British are coming, because too many of us are asleep at the wheel while things are just going backwards for us.
Well, what we pulled out of that is that voter suppression is intentional.
It's absolutely intentional.
Yes, sir. Let's fast forward now, sir. Just given the effects of Hurricane Helene and now most recently Milton, where can environmental vote suppression, how can that be seen? How does one who desires to vote navigate the issues that may arise with such events?
Well, I haven't experienced Katrina down here, which was as big as those storms, and God bless those people who have to go through the one right now. I think there are, at least you have to have some watchdog folk around to make sure that those services are provided. And there are numerous ways that they can provide the services. I mean, one election I did in Bosnia where we had to get 90,000 troops to vote and have them not move was to put the voting machines or put the voting machines on trailer trucks. But I think that most governments have a plan in place. We have a coup plan in Louisiana for that if that occurrence happens. But we have to be vigilant, and I think we have to have some voter groups watch that to make sure that it's done honestly and fairly. And if it gets really too bad, it may be some question of whether or not we can have elections in some of those parts, but hopefully not.
Yes, thank you, sir. So, Judge Lombard, we spoke to accountability, we spoke to voter suppression in its intentional nature, and then we spoke to environmental, which a lot of us are dealing with in the Southeast, are dealing with that environmental voter suppression piece right now. So I thank you for your very thoughtful responses to those questions. And as I got to remind you that this forum is designed for voter education and to facilitate voter mobilization. The opinions of this broadcast does not necessarily affect the views, policies, opinions of the ancient Egyptian Arabic order nobles of Mystic Shrine, or persons on this panel. You know, their personal capacity, not their professional capacity. And also, panelists, let's try to keep our comments to 3 minutes. And also, our viewing audience, please comment and ask questions, because soon we're going to open the floor and ask you to ask questions of our esteemed panelists. With this, we have question number 7, and we actually have two questions here, Mr. Thompson and Ms. Bardsdale. We understand, and Mr. Thompson, you can start off with the question. We understand that this is a federal election. However, can you comment on the importance of casting your vote at the local and state level?
Thank you for that question. If you allow me to use a phrase, there's a technique called link analysis. And I think link analysis can be used to answer this question. If you understand and put the federal at the top and draw a line down up under it and put state, then draw a line to the right and put local, you will see how they're connected. Back, I don't want to date myself like past Potentate Smith, but for those of us that look at cartoons on Saturday mornings, there was something called Schoolhouse Rock. And in Schoolhouse Rock, there was probably one of my favorite clips, I'm a bill, I'm only a bill. If we just look at that piece of it, just look at the link between federal and state. At the state level, we elect U.S. senators and we elect House of Representatives. There's people serve in that capacity. Those two, the only way a bill gets to become a law, it has to, once it becomes from an idea, it goes up, the House of Representatives has to approve it first. From that point, it goes over to the Senate who has to approve it, then for the president to sign it. So it's important that we realize that it's like any coach. You want people on your team that's going to support whatever your project is. So the Senate, who we put in the Senate, who we put in the House of Representatives is crucial, because that'd be the support base to give the president whatever he wants as far as what bills come forward. So yes, the state level, actions at the state level truly affect what happens on the national level, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so far very much. Ms. Bardsdale, with your experience, 10 questions.
So what I would say, it's better to start at the bottom and always participate. What I'm going to say is, when you think about state and local elections, those are the folks that affect your day-to-day life, like school board elections, city council, judges, your Congress people, your senators. So local elections and state elections are equally as important as the federal election, because again, your day-to-day lifestyle, your taxes, things of that nature are run by folks who are running in your local election and your state election. And as the gentleman said, your congressmen, your senators, and all that goes right up to the federal election. But the local, you know how they say all politics are local? And so you need to make sure you are paying attention to not only the federal election, but the state elections and your local election, because again, your kids go to school, your judges, your Congress folks, your city council people, they impact you on a day-to-day basis. So your local and state elections are equally as important.
Excellent phrase. We've all heard various degrees, all politics are local. So I would encourage the viewing audience to research, what does that really mean? What does that mean for the city? What does that mean for the state? What does that mean for the federal government? And how that affects you? That's a critical phrase. And I encourage you to research that and understand how city politics has in some situations a greater effect on your ability to live in a particular manner. So thank you so very much, Ms. Bardsdale. And because you gave such a great answer to number 7, I'm going to ask you question number 8 because based on your experience in the DOJ, this is a question I believe that we could speak further to. You can explain. Can you explain how different state laws affect individuals in the penal system's right to vote? Where can individuals obtain information on specific state voting laws for persons arrested but not charged, awaiting trial, and those on parole or release from the penal system? Ms. Barton.
So again, I had the pleasure of being in the Civil Rights Division and now in CRS at DOJ. However, just doing work in my personal capacity with various organizations, we try to make sure that folks know it's on a state-by-state basis. So the state set whether or not folks can vote in elections who have been charged or arrested or who have done time. So what I would always encourage folks when they ask is to make sure you reach out to your state government and find out what is the policy and what is the process in that particular state to know what can you do, because again, this is based on a state-by-state basis. Thank you.
Excellent. I tell you what, tonight for the last almost 40 minutes, I believe we shared information that has informed the viewing audience, and in some cases have armed us to go out and facilitate mobilization to those who are not so aware. So I thank everyone for their responses. So moving on, Mr. Lewis, research indicates that there has been a low turnout amongst Black and brown males in recent elections. What are some strategies for engaging young Black and brown males to become more active in the voting process?
It's a very good question. Also, that is very good statistics that has shown that what I think the communities in Black and brown communities have taken a lead on is engaging entities that have the said people involved. So what's happened is you have now local and national organizations such as the fraternities and sororities, the Divine Nine, that have engaged their members to get more involved and be more impactful on informational-oriented elections. That has also led into others, and the most impactful group, I think, that has led the Black and brown male election push has been the churches. It probably has always been that way, but now we see a resurgence in getting our young people, along with our middle-aged youth and our older people, back engaged on the importance of voting. And when you start doing it that way, what happens is not only do they become more involved, but the overall community, we believe, becomes more involved. And that has started a larger influx of Black and brown males going back to the polls and voting. And I think you're going to see a larger turnout, and not only this upcoming election, but other elections to come, just based upon that push.
Excellent. Wow. Such a great, complete answer. We appreciate it. Now, I'm understanding we want to identify and recognize a few of our viewers here tonight before we end with our last question. So with our IT, we have Ms. Cindy Powell Hughes, very informative. Thank you so very much for just attending with us tonight. We have Daughter Wood. As you can see, she's giving you a shout out to most worshipful Grandmaster DT. Okay, actually, yes, and it's just the event, great information, get the movement started. Absolutely. Thank you so very much, Roderick Jones, my brother and friend. Thank you so very much from that small town called Fayetteville, North Carolina. Yes, sir, Brother James. Okay, you're giving us good information here. Can we just hold that for a bit? Florida has a deadline to register. It is 29 days for each election. Early voting has started on October 21st. So that's critical. Whoever's in Florida that's viewing, take a screenshot, send this out to everybody you know and encourage others to send a screenshot out. It's the purpose of this panel discussion. Thank you. Any more? Yes, sir. Hello to you, sir. Yes, sir. We have some Imperial officers, Imperial Dive-Band members. Here, Rutledge. Yes, sir. Good evening, sir. Yes, we have the director of the voter registration.
Right.
The best. Here you go, sir. Good evening. Corporal Gary Sylvester out of Galconda, Imperial officer, Imperial Dive-Band officer. Just said his name. All right, we got you. Thank you. Yes. Whatever you do, whoever you do it for, just do that what JA is saying. Vote. Absolutely. No excuse. Oh, Juwan L. Avery, JA, another Imperial officer. These are all the Imperial officers. Thank you so very much for your presence. Yes, sir. We got the order. So we're going to have our last question. Then we're going to open the floor. To our viewing audience, and then we'll close. And the last question, Mr. Thompson, what was the impact on our communities when a specific protection of the Voting Rights Act were allowed to sunset?
Yeah, thank you for that question, my brother moderator. I think the impact on the communities was it forced us to stop being complacent and to get involved. It forced us to remind us to what I call 3 phases: decide what's important to us, define why it's important to us, and then defend it. When you decide what's important to you, it might be economics, it might be healthcare, it might be judicial. When you define why it's important to you, it might be the curriculum of education, access to education, or teachers' pay. For judicial, it might be judicial judgments made by judges. But in the bottom line, we got to get involved. Sometimes there's a saying, never say never. But I'm quite sure when the Voters' Rights Act of 1965 was passed, there was some of us that said, well, we've arrived, they'll never change it. But at the time the Voters' Rights Act was enacted in 65, there's a clause in there that it had to be updated every 5 years. So if you go back and look at it, the Voters' Rights Act was updated in 1970, 1975, 1982, 1992, and also in 2006. So we can never say never, and final's never final. So when it comes down to this, it's just not this election. We should be concerned about every election. We shouldn't hold our leaders accountable just now. They should be every week, every month, every year, because our society ain't just every 4 years society. It's an every day, every week, every month society. So we must hold ourselves accountable and not be complacent. If we get complacent, instead of going forward, we find ourselves going backwards. Thank you, sir.
Wow, such a complete answer. And I touched on the entire panel discussion. So I thank you for kind of putting a bow on this panel discussion, sir. Thank you so very much. I understand we have one question. And that's good.
Before we go, could I just add on to that? I think one of the major impacts was reapportionment. When legislators reapportion themselves, it used to have to get Justice Department approval. And so you see these states now with these super districts for a certain party, and that was the direct result of the Justice Department not having to review and to okay these legislative districts. And it's costing America dearly.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that amplification. Thank you very much. We did have a question, but that's okay, because we're right at that time limit. We spent 47 minutes with very, very thoughtful discussion. So with that, I like to go around the panel one more time. Take about a minute. Take about a minute, and just close out. And I'd like to start with Mr. Joe W. Lewis. Sir.
Well, good evening, everyone. Once again, it has been a fabulous evening. The most important part, I think, of the election process is making sure that you are registered to vote and going in early and voting, because you want to make sure your vote is able to be cast. And the best way to do that is not to wait until election day. The best way to do it is to do it as soon as you can. If you're allowed to vote tomorrow, go in and vote. And for some reason, if you have been redistricted or purged out, you have a possibility of being able to rectify that then before election day.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so much. And they're going to turn our sights now to Mr. Daniel L. Thompson, DT.
Thank you, sir. It's been truly a pleasure and honor to be a part of this informative and educational panel. I would say in my closing remarks, freedom isn't free. Our founders came up with these words: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But 87 years later, there was something called a Civil War, which was a price that had to be paid. It had to be paid. Fast forward from the Gettysburg Address of 1863 to the Civil Rights March in 1963. In order to get the Voters' Rights Act, we had to have the March on Washington. So here we find ourselves today, the 22nd of August, 2024, asking ourselves the same questions that Abraham Lincoln asked himself when he did the Gettysburg Address. Is this democracy we form going to succeed, or is it going to die? The only way it succeeds is when we define what's important to us, when we decide what's important to us, and we defend it by exercising our right to vote. Go vote. A voteless people is a hopeless people. Go vote.
Excellent. Thank you so very much, DT. Judge Lombard.
Thank you very much for inviting me on this panel. It's been a pleasure to participate with such an august panel discussion, and it's really been an honor for me to be a member of this panel. Now, what I've watched over the last 40 years is something that we're paying for right now, and I like to call it the dumbing down of America, where our school systems have been taken over for the last 40 years. And as a child, I was always taught the way out of the ghetto and poverty is through education, and to get your education. And somehow some people have discovered that the way to keep people in bondage is to just have a dumbing down process where you have taken lots of money from the school system. You change the whole school system. You talk about what you can teach. You talk about what you can't teach. And we're simply not paying attention. And I would like to urge everyone to go out and vote and pay attention to what's happening in our communities throughout America and to do something. Act, vote, talk, get involved, but by all means, vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Judge, and have a good evening. Mr. Smith.
Yes, sir. I want to say thank you for allowing me to be a part of this amazing discussion, and most important discussion for something that affects us all. When I think about one thing to close with, because I had the question about why should I vote in this? And I think of in the Bible it says, hope deferred makes the heart sick. And when you lose hope, that's when the enemy can come in and do some crazy things. So hopefully we can, as we've all said, as we all allude to, the right to vote, we've lost lives for our right to vote. And we have to instill. And then we just heard we've talked about the dumbing down and the different things. And when you make something seem like it doesn't matter, that's when other people can take control. And voting matters. So whatever we can do to get to those high school students, to those young college students, to get to those people who feel hopeless and give them hope in the voting, that's what we have to do. And that's where our organizations, from our Masonic organizations, our Shrine organizations, our Divine Nine organizations, our churches, just need to hold fast and keep doing the good work that we're doing to get people out to vote and get to those polls.
Excellent. Wow. Excellent, brother. Thank you so very much for that passionate yet direct, call to action. Go vote. Regardless of who you vote for, go vote. And while we're closing, ladies and gentlemen, please put your comments. Please add comments if you have something to say. If you want to comment on the show, please, so we can scroll through them and acknowledge you accordingly. And with that, we want to close our panelists' closing comments with Ms. Barksdale.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been a wonderful evening. I think we all have the responsibility that each one must teach one. And by now, we should know that elections have consequences, and so does not voting. So I encourage, I challenge each of us to bring 5 to 10 people to the polls with us. Make sure we are bringing that senior, making sure they have a way there, making sure that young person knows where they should vote. We have a responsibility and an obligation. We stand on shoulders. And 1965 was not that long ago. So we have not been afforded that right for a long time, and we must vote. Voting matters. Thank you so much.
Well, you've heard the challenge. You've heard the challenge cast. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? If we're just going to just say, well, somebody else could do it for me, or are we going to answer the challenge that Ms. Bardswell has put down on us? So with that, I'd like to again thank our Imperial Potentate, Thomas R. Hughes, and the Imperial Commanderess, Dr. Karen Wright Chisholm, for the wisdom to think about this forum to further educate, to further facilitate the mobilization of voting. Also like to thank Noble William Lewis, the Director of Corporate Affairs, and his Deputy Director, daughter Terry Jackson, and Noble Shauna Best, the Director for Voter Registration, and Noble Terrence Anderson and his entire IT section, who made this a flawless and beautiful event for this evening. His Imperial Media Relations, I tip my hat to your leadership and your experience. And I am Dr. Lawrence, and I'm from the mighty desert of Texas, the oasis of Dallas, Zakat Temple, number 164. Thank you for attending. Good night.